The views expressed on this broadcast of the Take 12 Recovery Radio Show do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting or its affiliates. KHLT and Take12Radio.com are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
Remember me, I'm the one down on the floor, telling these people that I ain't there no more. Calling and screaming, just about to lose my mind.
Welcome to Walking Through the Big Book with Chris Schroeder and Monty Meyer. And now, here's those two guys who investigate prior to contempt, Chris and the Monty'man.
Well, my friends. Here we are, another fine episode of Walking Through the Big Book with myself and Chris Schroeder. And it is exciting to be here with you. I was just listening to that song. I always just love that part. Remember me, the one down on the floor. You know, I'd wake up after these parties and look around, and there may be a couple people, you know, laying on the floor, but for the most part, everybody was gone, and it was just me sitting there, and it wouldn't even be my house. How you doing, Chris?
I am doing great, Monty, and I'm very fortunate not to be waking up in strange places anymore either.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm having technical difficulties with my headset, folks. Hold on. Okay, there we go.
I think probably the strangest place I ever woke up, Monty, was I came to after a party, and they had set me adrift in Tampa Bay in a dinghy with no oars.
Oh, no.
And I was about a mile offshore.
Gee, what'd you do?
Well, I had to get towed in by the Coast Guard.
Oh, man, Chris, what a
Which
story.
was quite embarrassing.
What a story. Well, speaking of stories, here we go again with the book that's got some of the greatest stories that have ever been written, including some of the greatest instructions for living that have ever been written, the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Folks, as we're going through, if this is the first time you've tuned in or you've done the naughty thing and skipped ahead, and you have the DVD, or you were listening online and you've skipped ahead here to show number, I think, probably 29. This is an in-depth study, sentence by sentence, really chapter by chapter, really looking into this thing called the Big Book and a better way of living and instructions for living that really can be applied in many areas of one's life. And particularly in the study of it here at Take 12 Radio, we're talking about alcoholism. And we are looking at the chapter of the family afterwards. And
yes, we are. One of the things, Monty, that is very, very interesting to me is in modern addiction and alcoholism treatment, over the course of the past 20 or 30 years, it's become really, really apparent that any treatment process, if it can, needs to include the family.
right.
Bill was so far-seeing. He saw so many things. He was like a visionary. You know, he talks in here about the entire family being to some extent ill, and that's really what modern clinicians and modern treatment centers have discovered. That's absolutely true. When there's addiction or when there's alcoholism in a family, to some degree, the entire family needs to be treated for there to be wholesale recovery throughout the family.
Mm-hmm.
And in this chapter, The Family Afterward, he talks about a number of things that he was very perceptive. That he was able to notice this in the small amount of time he was working with alcoholics and their families. But this is a great chapter, I think, for the alcoholic, for family members, for sponsors, for anyone to look at, because it has a lot of perceptions, it has a lot of observations, it has a lot of principles that you can practice in it, and there's a lot of value to this chapter. And it's a shame that it gets skipped over so much in certain workshops, or it doesn't get covered as much as some of the material in the other parts of the book.
Chris, in your experience, have you ever run across a family where living through and walking through the father, the child's, the mother's alcoholism, whoever it may be, they've discovered that they too are alcoholic?
Yeah, certainly that happens. Certainly that happens, and there's many people that I know who, because they had sent their kids to rehab or because their parents were in rehab, when they were in the family program, recognized their own alcoholism. That's happened quite often. More often than not, though, is a family, because the family gets sick over a period of time. Most often, they don't recognize how ill they really are. They don't understand the behavior patterns that they're following that are really, really unhealthy.
Right.
And sometimes it's a real challenge for someone to alert the rest of the family that they're not doing too good. More often than not, what will happen is, let's say the husband is the alcoholic. Everybody will be pointing the finger in the direction of the alcoholic. And when somebody stops and says, "Well, wait a minute, you've got some issues here yourself," so there's a lot of resistance. So often they can't believe it. I'm here for him, or I brought you guys over to talk about him, not me. And there'll be some resistance. But when you want to see a family, get healthy, I think each specific member of that family needs to take a close look at what's going on in their life, and take responsibility for anything they need to take responsibility for to get better.
Yeah.
And this is a great chapter to look at some of that stuff. So this is chapter 9, The Family Afterward. It's on page 122 of my book.
All right.
Our womenfolk have suggested certain attitudes a wife may take with a husband who is recovering. Perhaps they created the impression that he is to be wrapped in cotton wool and placed on a pedestal. Successful readjustment means the opposite. All members of the family should meet upon the common ground of tolerance, understanding, and love. Again, those are principles, and sometimes these principles are very, very difficult, to be able to get behind. I know it was a long while before my common ground was tolerance, understanding, and love. More often than not, it was anger, resentment, and judgmentalism.
Mm-hmm.
This involves a process of deflation. The alcoholic, his wife, his children, his in-laws, each one is likely to have fixed ideas about the family's attitude towards himself or herself. Each is interested in having his or her wishes respected. We find the more one member of the family demands that the others concede to him, the more resentful they become. This makes for discord and unhappiness. Earlier in the other chapters, it talked about we have to stop playing God. We have to stop being the actor, trying to run the whole show, trying to direct the play when we're not the director. We're just an actor in the play. And he's bringing that philosophy into the family. And if you look at any family that could be considered dysfunctional, for want of a better term, you're going to see that there's like warring factions. There's people maneuvering for position and manipulating other people in different ways, and all of that really leads to an unhealthy lifestyle and certainly an unhappiness all around.
Everybody takes their role, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for my part in the family that I came from, I really thought I was the smartest one. I really thought I had a unique perspective on, how life should be lived and how things should be thought about and how people should believe. And, it was really crazy because, in my family is a brother and sister who both have PhDs, a mother and a father who were Phi Beta Kappa from really great educational institutions. And, here I am. I graduated the second stupidest in my high school graduating class. and I think all of these people just don't get it. It's the unbelievable ego of the alcoholic.
Right.
So this makes for discord and unhappiness. And why? Is it not because each wants to play the lead? Is not each trying to arrange the family show to his liking? Is he not unconsciously trying to see what he can take from the family life rather than give? Here's a great concept. Cessation of drinking is but the first step away from a highly strained abnormal condition. I want to read that again.
Okay.
Quitting drinking is but the first step away from a highly strained abnormal condition. There are still so many people out there, Monty, that think sobriety is the goal of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Sobriety is certainly absolutely important, but recovery is the goal of this thing. Because the difference between sobriety and recovery is like the difference between night and day. A doctor said to us, years of living with an alcoholic is almost sure to make any wife or child neurotic. The entire family is, to some extent, ill. And that's certainly true. Today they're really, really finding out that families need so much work when a family member is getting sober and is being treated. Really, the whole family should be treated to some extent also. They're really finding this out.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill knew it from the beginning. Let families realize as they start their journey that all will not be fair weather. Each in his turn may be footsore and may straggle. There will be alluring shortcuts and bypass down which they may wander and lose their way. Suppose we tell you some of the obstacles a family will meet. Suppose we suggest how they may be avoided, even converted to good use for others. The family of an alcoholic longs for the return of happiness and security. They remember when father was romantic, thoughtful, and successful. Today's life is measured against that of other years, and when it falls short, the family may be unhappy. Family confidence in dad is rising high. The good old days will soon be back, they think. Sometimes they demand that dad bring them back instantly. God, they believe, almost owes this recompense on a long overdue account. But the head of the house has spent years pulling down the structures of business, romance, and friendship and health. These things are now ruined or damaged. It will take time to clear away the wreck. Though old buildings will eventually be replaced by finer ones, the new structures will take years to complete. Father knows he's to blame. It may take him many seasons of hard work to be restored financially, but he should not be reproached. Perhaps he will never have much money again, but the wise family will admire him for what he is trying to be rather than for what he is trying to get. And that's a spiritual concept. The more recovered you become, the less you're interested in what you can get, and the more interested you are in what you can be.
That's a challenging statement, though, right there, to tell a wife or I would say a child that is probably past the age of 16. Your husband or your father should not be reproached. I mean, these guys are madder than heck, and you're telling them, don't scold him. He's sick. Don't scold him. I mean, if I didn't know better, if I didn't know anything about this illness, I would probably chase you out of my house. What do you mean don't scold him?
yeah, he just burnt down, the new addition on the house and lost his job and wrecked the car and gambled away all the money. I'm not supposed to reproach him.
Yeah. We got a guy in our home group that cut his house in half with a chainsaw. How about that one?
He was probably in the middle of the divorce.
Yeah.
but I think to some degree, Bill, kind of put this in here. Don't nag, don't reproach,
right.
Don't criticize the alcoholic. I think he might have had a little bit of agenda, But I also think it's not going to help to reproach the alcoholic.
Right.
But listen, the chances of you being an alcoholic, getting sober, and then finding a really healthy recovery are you're not in the you're not in the majority. If you look at 5 to 10% of the population being alcoholic, and the small amount of people that are in recovery, you have to ask yourself, like maybe what is 10 or 15% of the alcoholics find their way to recovery.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's a fine line. Sometimes it's a dangerous road. And I think it is wise to try not to do things that might sabotage one's opportunity to get sober. Yeah. And I've seen things so destructive, Monty. One of the things I saw is this guy was so alcoholic he could barely hang on to a job. He was drunk constantly, but he was pretty successful with this particular job, and he was making a lot of money for the family. Well, he was dying. So, he comes into a support group, he gets a little bit of outpatient treatment, and he's really trying to get his life back together, and he is just shot out. And the first thing his wife is mad about is him going to meetings. Why are you going out every night? And she just basically badgered him to the point where he just couldn't go out, to these meetings anymore. I mean, it would cause a fight every single night, so he just, slowly stopped going. And he ended up relapsing and losing everything.
Mm-hmm.
So was that the smart thing to do, to badger this guy, saying, you're sober now, you need to stay at home, you owe me? Or would it have been wiser, looking at this like it's a medical condition, it's an illness, mm-hmm. This person needs to have his treatment, the recovery process. It would have been wiser, but there's a lot of misunderstanding in family members. They really think that, the alcoholic, did this on purpose. They still think that way. So again, I think it's kind of wise to caution them away from being, attacking the alcoholic while they're trying to get sober.
Sure.
Now and then the family will be plagued by specters from the past. For the drinking career of almost every alcoholic has been marked by escapades, funny and humiliating, shameful or tragic. The first impulse will be to bury these skeletons in a dark closet and padlock the door. The family may be possessed by the idea that future happiness can be based only upon forgetfulness of the past. We think that such a view is self-centered and in direct conflict with the new way of living. And it truly is, because the new way of living wants you to take responsibility for those skeletons in your closet so that you can truly remove them from the house. And, they won't be popping up anymore. Henry Ford once made a wise remark to the effect that experience is the thing of supreme value in life. That is true only if one is willing to turn the past to good account. We grow by our willingness to face and rectify errors and convert them into assets. The alcoholic's past thus becomes the principal asset of the family, and frequently it is the only one. That's a very, very interesting paragraph. First of all, the Henry Ford quote is great. Experience is the supreme thing of value in life, and certainly in support groups. There will be people in support groups who will share opinions, and there will be people in support groups who share experience. And I'll give you one example, Monty. Let's say somebody raises their hand in a 12-step meeting and says, I haven't done the step that we're talking about tonight formally, but I'm going to share a little bit about it, for the next 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And really, what they're doing is they're sharing an opinion. Now, somebody that raises their hand and says, I've just done a number of these amends, or I've just taken this step, and I want to tell you, what's going on in my life right now. They're going to be sharing their experience. So, for a member of a 12-step fellowship, one of the things you need to do is discern the difference between when someone is sharing their opinion, or slogans that they've heard for years and really don't know how to apply, when that's being shared, or when actual experience is being shared, because it is the experience that can save lives, and it's the opinions that can cost lives. It really is. And, the concept of actually taking your experience, even if it's a very bad one when you were out there drinking, and turning it into a principal asset in your life is an amazing one.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I first read this, I didn't know what they were talking about. I first read this book in a rehab. But today I understand what they're talking about. Some of the really bad things that happened to me, even in early sobriety, Monty, I'm able to share those things with someone who's struggling or is somewhere around that same mile marker on the road to recovery, and I can actually share my experience of those tough times and basically what I did and what happened because I did a certain thing, and how I've moved forward. It really is an asset that is incredibly beneficial to other people when you learn how to use it right.
It's like, talking about people saying things that they really don't know how to apply, or they're really not sure what they mean. Boy, you hear a lot of that. I mean, one thing in particular that I hear a lot from people that probably haven't even been in the rooms more than a month is when somebody new comes in, they say, "You're the most important person here today," and there's different opinions on that. You probably heard some, well, no, I'm the most important person here today. But that goes along with some of the other ones, the one day at a time thing, and they don't have a clue what they're talking about. And they almost look silly even when they say it.
Somewhere along the line in many of the 12-step fellowships, it became easier to just throw out little wisdom sayings or little cliches. It became easier than actually doing the work and gaining some experience. And that's really sad. As far as the newcomer being the most important person in the room, they're certainly not to me. I think the newcomer is the lifeblood of the 12-step fellowship, but the experienced member is the heart. Without an experienced member, then you're gonna have newcomers bouncing around like pinballs, never getting anywhere. Without someone experienced in the steps and in the concepts and in the principles and in the traditions, without that, there is going to be no direction for the newcomer, and it's going to be a bad Bob Newhart, group therapy session, which is going to be absolutely worthless, especially if they're really alcoholic. There's many sayings that I don't buy. Here's one of them. that I don't buy. Stick with the winners. Now, I believe that you should be sticking with the winners, before you get through the steps. But if you stick with the winners after you've gone through the steps, you're just going to be talking recovery with recovered people.
Yeah.
What we're supposed to be doing is sticking with the losers, helping the losers. You know what I mean?
Right.
We're supposed to be helping the people that are struggling and having a hard time. We're supposed to be in the trenches with them, trying to offer them a simple kit of spiritual tools, so that they can find recovery and probably salvation to their life. So again, sticking with the winners. These are slogans. We really don't know where they came from very much. There's one of them that I do know where it came from. You've heard of the one, think, 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 the upside down think, think, think?
Right.
Okay. What it was way back, I think it was the early 60s, maybe even the 50s, one of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous, who was in the central office around New York, who was stuffing letters to go out to the different areas and groups, worked for IBM. And in IBM, they printed up a bunch of these upside-down think things, and instead of the guy saying, hey, I guess I'll just throw these away, he thought, hey, this is pretty cool. I think I'll just stuff the envelopes with, I'll put this in with the envelopes too. So all of a sudden, all these groups around the United States got these letters, and it had the think, think, think thing in there. So they figured, oh, this must be a new slogan, and they put it up on the wall. You don't know where some of these came from. And another thing about slogans is they leave so much latitude in interpretation that if you say something like "easy does it" to somebody, they may think, well, easy does it. I'm not going to go to too many meetings, and I'm going to take my time with the steps, and easy does it. I'm going to take it easy on the commitments and the service in my life. And if you do that, easy done killed you is easy did. So it's just some of them should just be kept in the closet where they belong, because what you're doing is you may have an entire different interpretation of that slogan. It may be very, very appropriate for you and very meaningful to you, and you give it to a newcomer with a sick mind, and it's going to sabotage them.
Right.
It could sabotage their forward momentum. So as you can probably tell, I'm not a big slogan guy.
Right.
But
Yeah. I think even one of them came from Al-Anon, I think, didn't it?
Which one?
Was it Live and Let Live, or?
I think at the end of this chapter, Live and Let Live, it's actually Bill Wilson put it, first things first, live and let live, easy does it. But again, for us to understand those in context, we really have to place ourselves back in the late 30s groups. Oxford group of drunk scenario where they came from. First things first is basically place God and His kingdom first, and everything else will come to you. I don't really even know what they mean by some of these other ones, but to really understand what they're saying, you have to understand it in context and not make up your own context.
Right.
So, they can be dangerous. All right, let's get back to the book. This painful past may be of infinite value to other families still struggling with their problem. We think each family which has been relieved owes something to those who have not. And when the occasion requires, each member of it should be only too willing to bring the former mistakes, no matter how grievous, out of their hiding places. Showing others who suffer how we were given help is the very thing which makes life seem so worthwhile to us now. Cling to the thought that, in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have, the key to life and happiness for others. With it, you can avert death and misery for them. Interesting in this paragraph, certainly throughout the whole narrative of this book, it's all about preparing us as recovered alcoholics to help others recover. In this paragraph, it's basically saying families who have been relieved, families who have learned this way of life, families who now have a recovered family member, need to go out and help other families. It's very, very interesting, and certainly not something that really happens a whole lot these days, unfortunately. There is the family groups and
here's another
that, but
Chris, here's another thing I can envision. Okay, here's the guy who's been going to meetings, and he's actually doing very well. He's been there for a few years, but the family is still kind of got an ouch factor still going on, and the poor guy comes home and says, I think would really help Marge and Jimmy and Janet. I think if you go out and help some other families, you might feel better about yourself.
Yeah.
Marge might just throw a coffee can at him or something. But it is true. It is true, though.
Let's look at this in context. Two things. One of them is these early members went through the steps in a very short period of time, no more than several weeks. Okay, they went through the steps, and they've already made direct amends to the best of whatever ability they had at the time to the family. Number two, it was very important, especially for Dr. Bob, to bring the family into the meetings. Okay, the family were invited into the meetings, into the homes. They were all pretty much open meetings. The alcoholics were the ones that talked, but the family members were invited basically to learn how to do the prayer and meditation and learn the spiritual principles so that they could apply it in their life. So you have to take it in context. Today, that's really not what happens. You send father off to go to those 12-step meetings, and you stay home and you watch 60 Minutes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's really not the way it used to be anymore. So, if you look at it in context, they had a better chance of being helpful in the old days because they were drawn in more fully into the whole process. It is possible to dig up past mistakes so that they become a blight, a veritable plague. For example, we know of situations in which the alcoholic or his wife have had love affairs. In the first flush of spiritual experience, they forgive each other and drew closer together. The miracle of reconciliation was at hand. Then, under one provocation or another, the aggrieved one would unearth the old affair and angrily cast its ashes about. A few of us have had these growing pains, and they hurt a great deal. Husbands and wives have sometimes been obliged to separate for a time until new perspective, new victory over hurt pride could be re-won. In most cases, the alcoholics survive this ordeal without relapse, but not always. So we think that unless some good and useful purpose is to be served, past occurrences should not be discussed. Now, I used to do big book workshops with this guy who had a rule. It was a 7-day rule in the family. After 7 days, if there was something that somebody was upset about or someone did something wrong, it was not to be brought up. After 7 days, if you haven't dealt with it somehow, if amends haven't been made, if you haven't gotten current with them about it, it was to be left alone. And I can't honestly tell you I've practiced that policy, but it sounds like a good one to me. Sometimes bringing these things up serves no good occurrence. I've had relationships with people who, women specifically, that would bring things up that I did 15 years ago. And I mean that's really not helpful in today's current state of affairs. It really doesn't have any relevance on who I am today or how I'm operating today, and all it does is add fuel to a fire.
Now, Chris, some women are going to be mad at this, what I'm going to say, but that's okay. This is just my observation, all right?
Okay.
Okay, guys can be playing basketball with each other, and one guy just gets a little too rough and punches the other guy in the nose with his elbow, and they go at it, man. They are madder than hatters at each other. And within 20 minutes, they're playing basketball again. Everything's forgot.
Sure.
Gals, however, what I've experienced is something I did 15 years ago. It's like, this is just like what you did 15 years ago when you did such and such. What is up with that?
I think it's a processing error or something.
Yeah.
I mean, men have processing errors and women have processing errors in their thinking patterns. That could be, I'll say, a little bit different than one another. Gender specific. We each have our issues and faults. The fact of the matter is if you're dealing with an alcoholic, you're dealing with an ill person, and until they've got some serious recovery under their belt, and they're standing on solid footing, you're not really helping by engaging in a heated argument.
Right.
It's just let's all try to find a way around that, And again, it's growing pains. Bill Wilson talked about all this stuff as basically growing pains. It's not right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just hopefully we're moving forward. Our momentum is forward moving rather than backward. We families of Alcoholics Anonymous keep few skeletons in the closet. Everyone knows about the other alcoholics' troubles. This is a condition which, in ordinary life, would produce untold grief. There might be scandalous gossip, laughter at the expense of other people, and the tendency to take advantage of intimate information. Among us, these are rare occurrences. We do talk about each other a great deal, but we almost invariably temper such talk by a spirit of love and tolerance. Another principle we observe carefully is that we do not relate intimate experiences of another person unless we are sure he would approve. We find it better when possible to stick to our own stories. A man may criticize or laugh at himself and will affect others favorably, but criticism or ridicule coming from another often produces the contrary effect. Members of a family should watch such matters carefully, for one careless, inconsiderate remark has been known to raise the very devil. We alcoholics are sensitive people. It takes some of us a long time to outgrow that serious handicap. It certainly took me several years. You know, the steps propelled me forward past that sensitiveness. You know, it was unfortunately a little while until I had started to do the steps, but I was tragically attached to what I thought other people thought of me. You know, the impression I thought I was giving.
Too.
And when someone was insulting or critical of me, I took it at such a personal level. It was vendetta-esque, you know. And you know, that's how sensitive we can be sometimes.
Yeah.
Here's another thing. You know, I was just talking to somebody today about the switching of addictions. More and more in modern treatment, they're recognizing that very few people have only one addiction, and many people will switch addictions. They'll get sober, but they'll gamble, and then they'll curb their gambling, and then they'll be into pornography on the web, and you know, or they'll be shopaholics, or you know, they'll have food problems. I mean, they're seeing that more and more the addictive personality is manifest, even when someone gets sober or someone gets clean from drugs. So here again, Bill is kind of seeing this ahead of time. Many alcoholics are enthusiasts. They run to extremes. At the beginning of recovery, a man will take, as a rule, one of two directions. He may either plunge into a frantic attempt to get on his feet in business, workaholism, or he may be so enthralled by his new life that he talks or thinks of little else, or somebody who quits his job just to do AA full-time. You know, I've met some people like that, Monty. I knew a couple of guys that had great careers. They got sober, and all of a sudden they ended up in the coffee shop just talking about sobriety all day long, and started, you know, cashing in their retirement accounts so that they could be spiritual. And you know, that again, that's another unhealthy dependence.
Yeah.
You know, it's an unhealthy dependence to be a workaholic. It's an unhealthy dependence to, you know, be a recovery-aholic. There has to be, you know, some kind of balance. In either case, certain family problems will arise. With these, we have had experience galore. We think it dangerous if he rushes headlong at his economic problem. The family will be affected also, pleasantly at first as they feel their money troubles are about to be solved, but then not so pleasantly as they find themselves neglected. Dad may be tired at night and preoccupied by day. He may take small interest in the children and may show irritation when reproved for his delinquencies. If not irritable, he may seem dull and boring, not gay and affectionate as the family would like him to be. Mother may complain of inattention. They are all disappointed and often let him feel it. Beginning with such complaints, a barrier arises. He is straining every nerve to make up for lost time. He is striving to recover fortune and reputation and feels he is doing very well. Sometimes mother and children don't think so. Having been neglected and misused in the past, they think father owes them more than they are getting. They want him to make a fuss over them. They expect him to give them the nice things they used to have before he drank so much, and to show his contrition for what they suffered. But that doesn't give freely of himself. Resentment grows. He becomes still less communicative. Sometimes he explodes over a trifle. The family is mystified. They criticize, pointing out how he is falling down on his spiritual program. This sort of thing can be avoided. Both father and the family are mistaken, though each side may have some justification. It is of little use to argue, and only makes the impasse worse. The family must realize that Dad, though marvelously improved, is still convalescing. They should be thankful he is sober and able to be of this world once more. Let them praise his progress. Let them remember that his drinking wrought all kinds of damage that may take long to repair. If they sense these things, they will not take so seriously his periods of crankiness, depression, or apathy, which will disappear when there is tolerance, love, and spiritual understanding. He's kind of warning the family that what you give out, you will get back.
Mm-hmm.
If you give out, positive acceptance of the Father, you're probably going to get back, a positive reaction. And that's just a spiritual principle that's good at all times. But especially in the tricky times in say, the alcoholic's first year or two back in the family.
Mm-hmm.
The head of the house ought to remember that he is mainly to blame for what befell his home. He can scarcely square the account in his lifetime, but he must see the danger of over-concentration on financial success. Although financial recovery is on the way for many of us, we found we could not place money first. For us, material well-being always followed spiritual progress. It never preceded. I have seen, Monty, a lot of people fail because they put so much attention into work. They had to have that big job where they were gone from 6 in the morning till 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and they just did not have time for support group meetings. I'm sorry, I'll do a little bit on the weekend if I have time. And by placing work at a higher level of importance than recovery, they sabotaged both. In other words, the great lie every alcoholic tells themselves is, I've got this now. I'm okay. Thanks for the information. Now that I know I need to not drink, I'm going to get back about my life. Sometimes they have to learn by falling. Sometimes they learn by other people's experience and by, listening to a sponsor or a spiritual advisor, but sometimes they have to fall. And I've seen many people fall who put way more importance on their job than they did on meetings, steps, and service. And, sometimes you got to learn the hard way.
Yeah, and I've heard that slogan. I got sober, I got a car, I got a job, I got a girl, I got drunk.
Yeah. You can't let what recovery gives you, the things that recovery gives you, take you away from recovery. I mean, that would be stupid, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So there's a balance, and a good sponsor, a good spiritual advisor, given the spiritual consent to take the person to task, is going to help them along this path, because it is a tricky path. I'd never gotten sober or gotten involved in recovery before I got sober and got into recovery. I needed some help.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times, what my sponsor's job was pointing me back toward meetings, steps, and service. Meetings, steps, service. Meetings, steps, service. Remember that. Work is something you do after meeting, steps, and service. Meeting, steps, and service are not something you do after work. It's a shift in perspective, but sometimes it's one that'll save your life. Since a home has suffered more than anything else, it is well that a man exert himself there. He is not likely to get far in any direction if he fails to show unselfishness and love under his own roof. We know there are difficult wives and families, but the man who is getting over alcoholism must remember he did much to make them so. As each member of a resentful family begins to see his shortcomings and admits them to others, he lays the basis for a helpful discussion. These family talks will be constructive if they can be carried on without heated argument, self-pity, self-justification, or resentful criticism. Good luck with that on your first few of them. Little by little, mother and children will see they ask too much, and father will see he gives too little. Giving rather than getting will become the guiding principle. And that has to be that's the guiding principle of this book. So often I see people heading toward their support groups to fill up like it's a spiritual gas station, or they'll come out of a meeting complaining that they didn't get anything out of that meeting. Okay? Those people are under the mistaken idea that they're going there to get. Those meetings are certainly a place where newcomers can get, but if you've been around a while, they're a place where you're supposed to go to give. Giving rather than getting should be your guiding principle when going off to a support group meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Assume, on the other hand, that Father has, at the outset, a stirring spiritual experience. Overnight, as it were, he is a different man. He becomes a religious enthusiast. He is unable to focus on anything else. As soon as his sobriety begins to be taken as a matter of course, the families may look at their strange new dad with apprehension and then with irritation. There is talk about spiritual matters morning, noon, and night. He may demand that the family find God in a hurry or exhibit amazing indifference to them and say he is above worldly consideration. He may tell Mother, who has been religious all her life, that she doesn't know what it's all about and that she had better get his brand of spirituality while there is yet time. When Father takes this tack, the family may react unfavorably. They may be jealous of a God who has stolen Dad's affection. While grateful that he drinks no more, they may not like the idea that God has accomplished the miracle where they failed. They often forget Father was beyond human aid. They may not see why their love and devotion did not straighten him out. Dad is not so spiritual after all, they say. If he means to right his past wrongs, why all this concern for everyone in the world but his family? What about his talk that God will take care of them? They suspect Father is a bit balmy. He is not so unbalanced as they might think. Many of us have experienced Dad's elation. We have indulged in spiritual intoxication, like a gaunt prospector. Belt drawn in over the last ounce of food, our pick struck gold. Joy at our release from a lifetime of frustration knew no bounds. Father feels he has struck something better than gold. For a time he may try to hug the new treasure to himself. He may not see at once that he has barely scratched a limitless load which will pay dividends only if he mines it for the rest of his life and insists on giving away the entire product. I love that sentence. I don't know about you, Monty, but it's a great descriptive of what we do on the spiritual plane in the recovery process, isn't it?
Yeah, and we do. I do believe I concur with that. We have to give the whole package away, because we've been keeping pieces of whatever to ourselves for a long time, and really deceiving people. Making them think we've been giving all of us. Yeah,
and I'll tell you what's funny. We've barely scratched a limitless load, and it will pay heavy dividends only if we mine it for the rest of our life and insist on giving away the entire product.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a number of different contradictions, but it is a great descriptive of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And the dividends are spiritual dividends and emotional dividends. They really are. If the family cooperates, Dad will soon see that he is suffering from a distortion of values. He will perceive that his spiritual growth is lopsided. That for an average man like himself, spiritual life, which does not include his family obligations, may not be so perfect after all. If the family will appreciate that Dad's current behavior is but a phase of his development, the evangelical phase, all will be well. In the midst of an understanding and sympathetic family, these vagaries of Dad's spiritual infancy will quickly disappear. The opposite may happen should the family condemn and criticize. Dad may feel that for years his drinking has placed him on the wrong side of every argument, but that now he has become a superior person with God on his side. If the family persists in criticism, this fallacy may take a still greater hold on Father. Instead of treating the family as he should, he may retreat further into himself and feel he has spiritual justification for doing so. He may even leave. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because he just doesn't feel comfortable in the family unit. Though the family does not fully agree with Dad's spiritual activities, they should let him have his head. Even if he displays a certain amount of neglect and irresponsibility toward the family, it is well to let him go as far as he likes in helping other alcoholics. During those first days of convalescence, this will do more to ensure his sobriety than anything else. Let's look at this sentence for a second, Monty. helping other alcoholics. In other words, going out and finding a prospect, then turning him into a protege who you're taking through the steps, and then they're going to end up being a friend. That's finding and helping another alcoholic in the context of this book. It says, during those first days of convalescence. So doesn't that mean that almost from the get-go, you can go out and start to help other alcoholics?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What about the wisdom teaching that's so current in 12-step fellowships that you need a year before you can sponsor?
Oh, right. We hear that all the time.
Doesn't that go at odds with what this book is saying?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I know folks that if somebody asks them to be their sponsor, they will tell them, that's fine, but I'm going to wait 30 days to see if you're serious.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, the guy dies, you know.
yeah, the guy dies. Well, he must not have really wanted it. He must not have really been serious. There are a lot of boneheads out there with zero experience, and beware. Beware. That's all I can tell you. There has to be, the people who have experience really have to stand up. That's what one of the things that happened in AA from say 1950 on was, the newcomers were starting to overtake the old timers. All of a sudden, there were way more newcomers than there were old timers, and I really think that from 50 to say 1990. People abdicated their responsibility. Their responsibility was grabbing these people and taking them through the steps. And for one reason or another, the members in many different areas in Alcoholics Anonymous did not do that, didn't keep that up. And what happened was the inmates started to run the asylum. And, now you get just any kind of hobble gobble in the world is passed on as recovery wisdom in some of these support groups. And I got to tell you, it's because the old timers were overrun and abdicated their responsibility from say 1950 to 1990 or so when the big book movement started to pick back up.
Yeah,
and that's our fault, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I sat in a meeting here last week. And a newcomer, I think I've seen him in there maybe 4 or 5 times. He but all pleaded for a sponsor, and there was no response from anyone. Nothing. And I sat there, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm booked because I've got this guy and this guy and this guy. And at the very least, and I put this on myself too. At the very least, I could have said, well, let's go out for coffee. But nobody said anything, and I was dumbfounded.
One of the principles of the fellowship is when somebody reaches out for AA, the hand of AA must always be there. That's a statement of unity or whatever, and that's absolutely true. But that does not mean that you need to take on a guy if it's inappropriate,
right? Of course not.
It's not a good fit. But it does mean that you have to help them find somebody. You have to.
Yeah.
If you have just gone there to fill up and you're not interested in reaching out your hand, then you don't understand that you need to continue to mine for a lifetime and give away the entire product to get the dividends.
Mm-hmm.
The dividends come from helping other people. They don't come from sitting in a chair, night after night after night. They just don't, and you don't know that unless you're experienced with the recovery process. You don't know what's available. How do you know what you don't know?
Yeah,
and it's kind of up to us sometimes, Monty, to talk about that. There's more available.
Yeah,
than just mere treacherous sobriety by sitting in a chair and hopefully trying to remember on a daily basis not to drink when in fact you're really powerless.
Yeah.
So anyway, you know how I feel. We talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
During those first days of convalescence, this will do more to ensure his sobriety than anything else. Though some of his manifestations are alarming and disagreeable, we think that will be on firmer foundation when the man who is placing business or professional success ahead of spiritual development. really, spiritual development needs to be placed ahead of business or professional success. And it's basically saying that, yes, you have to take family responsibilities, but if you're not taking the spiritual development seriously as well as the family responsibilities, you're going to disappoint both. You're going to fail at both. So rather than fail at both, the primary purpose is to stay sober, recover, and help others recover. And then you can fit everything else in after that. He will be less likely to drink again, and anything is preferable to that. Those of us who have spent much time in the world of spiritual make-believe have eventually seen the childishness of it. This dream world has been replaced by a great sense of purpose, accompanied by a growing consciousness of the power of God in our lives. We have come to believe that He would like us to keep our heads in the clouds with Him, but that our feet ought to be firmly planted on earth. That is where our fellow travelers are, and that is where our work must be done. These are the realities for us. We have found nothing incompatible between a powerful spiritual experience and a life of sane and happy usefulness. There's a great poem that was written by Sam Shoemaker. Have you ever heard the poem "I Stand by the Door," Monty?
No.
You know what? I'm going to dig it up, and maybe to finish out this workshop, I'll read it, because I think it's so pertinent to where we have to place ourselves on the spiritual plane.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who go to India and study with the Dalai Lama and learn to pray and meditate, and they go off into silent retreats for 2 or 3 years at a time. As alcoholics or addicts, we can't go that far. We need to stand by the door, because it's by the door where we can help other people. Yes, the spiritual life is very attractive, and some people go really deeply into it. But if we go too deeply into it, to not be at a place where we can be helpful to our fellow suffering alcoholics or addicts, we're doing a huge disservice, not only to mankind, God and his children, but we're doing a disservice to ourselves too.
So are you saying, Chris, that I can't sit on a hilltop playing Kumbaya for the rest of my life?
I don't think it would be profitable in a number of different ways. And honestly, Monty, I don't think that's where God wants you.
Yeah.
I think God wants you behind a microphone. That's where I think. And I think God wants you in your support group meetings. And I think God wants you sponsoring. And then I think He wants you to make a little bit of money and to do the other stuff that you got going on in your life. But
yeah.
You're uniquely suited. Right now, you're especially uniquely suited to really be carrying a message of depth and weight, and really to be helpful to other alcoholics. And that's where I think He wants you.
Yeah.
If you called me up and told me that there's this missionary work deep in the heart of Africa, and you feel drawn to working with the Aboriginal pygmies or something, and you're going to go there as a missionary or something, I would say, wait a minute, Monty. You know what? I bet you God's got somebody else who can do that pygmy missionary work. I think you need to stick with the alcoholic. That's what I would tell you.
The pygmy alcoholic.
Yeah, well, if there was some pygmy Aboriginal alcoholics, that would be a whole different thing.
Yeah. We're out of time, my friend. Where are we at in this chapter?
We're a little more than halfway through. We'll finish this up next time. Okay,
great. Well, I don't have any ambitions to go to any pygmy tribes, to tell you the truth. And I agree with you 100%. A lot of people are burdened by something, but they're not called to it. And based on the burden, they go and try and do it, and they fall flat on their face. You know what I mean? I mean, they have a heart for it, but perhaps it's a heart to pray for that or to help send somebody else. But they're not called to that by God, and so they go out there and they make a mess of it. And I've seen that happen. And yet the ones that are really called to whatever it is they're doing, and I think the only way you know that is to get to know your Creator even more. And there's different ways of doing that. And one is, for me, is to be in His Word, to have a conscious contact with Him, like AA talks about, and to be honest with God. He knows anyway. But it's interesting because I can be honest with somebody else. I can even be honest with myself. But there's some weird thing about maybe God won't find out, about certain. So we have to be honest to God. I think the more we know Him, the more we get to know Him, the easier it is to hear His voice. And then we know if we're called to something or simply burdened by it. And I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, although that's a slogan we could talk about sometime that I can't stand. For a number of reasons. Well, Chris, thank you.
Monty, thank you. It's always a delight to be batting these things back and forth with you. I love sharing my experience, and sometimes my opinions flow in there a little bit.
Yeah.
I guess that's okay, too.
That is okay. That's perfectly all right.
But anyway, it's always a blast talking with you.
All right, Chris. Folks, don't forget to tune in to all of our shows here at take12radio.com. And until next Sunday, God bless you guys. Serenity for you. Until once again, we walk through the big book. Bye-bye.
Wow.
This has been a broadcast of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.